Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, proud members of the Pigskin Podcast Network. You can find them at PigskinPodNet on Twitter, or you can search the hashtag TPPN as we and every single other podcast that is a part of this network goes live. Tons of other podcasts, baseball, thank God. They were able to reach a labor agreement, and we will get baseball. I am still a massive baseball fan. Excited in the doldrums of summer when there's nothing going on to just throw in some baseball games and keep myself entertained. As always, we have got Dennis and Matt here with us for today's show. We're going to talk about all of the crazy NFL trades that have gone on and some of the tags, and we have not even technically hit the brand new NFL year, and free agency has not opened yet. Gentlemen, how are we doing on this amazing Friday?
I'm having a fantastic day. I'm watching one of my leagues melt down because of a trade offer. So let me ask you.
Yeah, I was going to say you got to give the trade offer now.
So it's a 12-team, one quarterback PPR league. I think you start 10. DeAndre Swift or Travis Etienne and the 101.
Wait, sorry, what was that? I was
DeAndre
Swift
or Travis Etienne and the 101.
Then did you say if it was PPR?
Why is that a
PPR?
Why is that a bad trade?
1 QB.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know which side I would want, which tells me that it's
I know what side
a pretty good trade.
I know what side I'd want, but I think it's a fairish trade. I think it all depends on, I guess, realistically, what you think of ETN, and it's not super flex, right?
No. So it's definitely
then what you think of
what
you think of ETN and Breece Hall, because that's who's going at 1-1, unless whoever takes 1-1 is not a smart owner. But
right. So to me, I look at it and I'm like, it seems like a reasonable trade. I could see making the argument for one side or the other. One guy, it was like, well, I'm just trying to get younger. I don't know, with any of the players in there, I don't know how much younger you're getting with Swift, ETN, and Breece Hall. It's like, I think they're all within 24 months of each other. So you're not getting a ton younger regardless. Yeah. Just had 3 people leave the league over it.
Wow.
Oh my God. Was it accepted?
No, the guy who, the one person thought it was a terrible. So somebody made the offer. The other person thought it was a laughable, terrible offer. I'm not even sure which side was offered, because if I look at it, I don't know which side would be considered laughable. And then one person decided to post a poll about it in the chat. And now it's like,
jeez, like, I don't think
these
I
are
can
kind of March meltdowns in fantasy.
Yeah.
Leagues.
Like, I can understand someone thinking it's a bad trade. Again, it all coming on what your opinions are. Like, I am not high on Travis Etienne at all. I know a lot of people
high on him either.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I was having a discussion with a bunch of people the other day, because obviously we know James Robinson at least is not coming back till late in the season. So it's likely Travis Etienne's show as of right now. And I talked about, and I think he was actually 3 for all of us behind Javonte And my goodness, why can I not remember the other running back right
Najee
now?
Harris.
Najee Harris, thank you.
But I will be honest, in a lot of my dynasty rookie drafts, that was the same for us. But Travis Etienne almost always went before Javonte Williams, which I think was weird.
He did not in most of the leagues that I was in. But so I'm just going to be honest. I literally did that exact same trade in the middle of the season this year. And I was a contender. I lost. Who got hurt? A running back got hurt toward the middle part of the year. I was a 3 seed. I turned around and I traded because I lost Dobbins early in the year. I know I lost Chubb when Chubb got hurt. Right? Chubb got hurt and missed a couple games. Okay. I had lost Dobbins earlier in the year, and so my running back was Nick Chubb, and I don't even remember who my second running back was. And so I made a move to the DeAndre Swift owner. I was like, hey, look, he was like second to last, had not even won a game yet. And I was like, hey, getting close to our trade deadline. I was like, are you rebuilding? And he's like, I mean, depends on what you're offering. I was like, I'll give you Travis Etienne in the 2022 first for DeAndre Swift right now. And he said, deal. I didn't think twice about it. Like, in my opinion, I was like, I'm giving up. Now, granted, I finished third in this league, so it's like, in my opinion, I was going to give up a back and first. It wasn't 1-1, but still, like, I think Breece Hall is going to be very close to DeAndre Swift at the end of the game. So, yes, the guy taking obviously, it feels like the league's going to fold after this trade offer, but, like, if the guy...
and it wasn't even accepted. That's the... I thought you were going to tell us that the trade went through, but they didn't even agree to a trade and everybody left.
I could see in like a couple years how that is like a massive deal for whoever got Etienne and Hall. If Hall ends up being, you know what I bet it is? I bet it's the combine stuff. And now everybody's rating Breece is like, well, there's a lot of people talking about it as a top 5 running back. So like you're looking at it as, okay, you're getting it's a top five switch, right? Because I have Swift in my top 5. So it's like, oh, you're getting Breece Hall and DeAndre Swift. That's a fair swap. But then you're getting Travis Etienne, and if people have him rated as a top 12 running back, then that's where people are having an issue with it. I don't think that's where Travis Etienne's going to be. Even with the volume, I just don't think Etienne's going to be that good. He's overrated as a receiving back, in my opinion, as well. So that's interesting, I guess. That's what I guess makes fantasy football so much fun, because there's so many people who just have such different variations. But to like see a trade, like I've seen some shitty trades go down sometimes and like massive blow-ups in our leagues, but never people be like, I'm quitting over a trade offer. Like I've seen guys get upset because they offered that trade and a bunch of us thought it was unfair and we made a big deal about it in the chat. But at the end of the day, like nobody left over. That's just kind of interesting, I guess.
Yeah, it's so it's the league that was the kid first league. So we lost a guy because his child isn't interested anymore. He left at the end of the season. And one of the other guys was like, well, my kid's basically running the team anyways, so I'll just take over that orphan and he can keep running this team. It's like no big deal. He's probably one of the older kids in the league. So 2 of the 3 people that left were a father and son. I don't know. Again, and somebody's like, well, we probably don't want to call trades out like that in the chat if we're trying to teach our kids how to play Dynasty. But
that makes it even worse. It's in a league with kids.
Well, and most of us don't really know each other. And so it's like, you don't know, like I did not manage the team for Cole. I reminded him, hey, you need to do this. You need to do that. What do you want to do here? Here are your options of who you have to start, things like that. But I don't know what other parents were doing it that way also versus, oh, my kid just lost interest. And so I'm just going to manage this team myself. So I don't know. It's kind of silly. We'll see what happens if the league makes it or not. It's a free league, and I'm not terribly motivated in free leagues anyways.
That might be the most compelling trade discussion in the entire NFL week.
The trade that never was.
I don't know about that. We're about to get to some very interesting things. I'm very curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are.
You had me at Commanders.
Yeah, I mean it's been a crazy week, so let's dive into it. We'll just start right there because you mentioned it, the Carson Wentz trade. You know, we talked a lot about this last week, or no, on Monday, wasn't it? It was Monday's
Yeah,
show.
Monday was Monday.
Where we thought these guys would go, and I feel like we all talked about Carson Wentz likely was going to go somewhere to be a backup because the Colts already seemed so set on cutting him, and in my opinion, I just didn't understand why any team would then at that point trade for him if he's going to get cut. Well, Washington heard
Daniel
us and
Snyder said, "Hold my beer."
hold my beer. Yeah, they went ahead and made the trade. Wentz, a 2022 second, a 2022 seventh, a 2022 second, 2022 third, and conditional 2022. That's one of the seconds is a conditional, right? To a 2022 third.
No, so basically, Wentz, the Colts second and the Colts seventh for Washington's second, Washington's third, and a 2023 conditional third, where it could become a second if Wentz plays more than 70% of the snaps, which is what bit the Colts with losing a first-round pick with Wentz and that Eagles trade. So the biggest probably thing for the Colts is the Washington Commanders agreed to eat Wentz's entire salary.
Yeah, so I mean that definitely opens up space there for Indy. We will get to them in a second. Let's start with his new team. I'll let you guys go first. Matt, like what are your thoughts on this? I mean, they still have Heineke there, obviously, and they do have some weapons around them. Like I think it might honestly be fair to say it's a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball, skill position wise, than or equal to Indy. I guess it depends on what you see of the comparison of Terry McLaurin to Pittman, because Taylor is obviously heads above Antonio Gibson. But like if you bring, in my opinion, Terry McLaurin is heads above Michael Pittman, so they maybe kind of even each other out. But what are your thoughts on Wentz going to the Commanders?
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. You and I had talked about whether Heineke was going to get a shot, and in the middle of the season, I kind of thought he played well enough, but toward the end of the season, we kind of felt like he played himself out of it. You can almost say the same thing about Carson Wentz, to the point where I'm not entirely convinced that Carson Wentz is an upgrade over Taylor Heineke, which is fascinating. I mentioned before we went on air, there's also been a lot of people that think Washington's going to use the number 11 pick to go get a quarterback, which then makes zero sense to me. I think probably the only way this makes sense is they have Wentz, who's going to nominally be the starter, or it's going to end up being Heineke, and they need to use their draft picks to build up the position. And then maybe if it doesn't work out, you look at the 2023 class, which might be a little bit better. This feels like a stopgap solution. We'll talk about the Russell Wilson trade in a minute, but the Commanders, it came out, made a strong offer for Wilson, and he would not waive his no trade clause for them. The Eagles also made an offer for Wilson. He would not waive his no trade clause for them. So that kind of gives you a sense that after Rodgers went back to Green Bay and Wilson told them no, they probably started to panic a little bit, which is what it is. For the fantasy weapons, to me, it's fantasy neutral for Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson. I don't think getting Wentz really helps or hurts them. It will be interesting to see, as you said, Washington, if Curtis Samuel can come back healthy. They really saw nothing from him last year. If Logan Thomas can come back healthy, maybe they add another piece in free agency or the draft. They could have better weapons, because the Colts were kind of down to Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, and Hope.
Yeah, I actually think it's an upgrade over Heineke. I think while Wentz gets a lot of shit, he's probably a league average or slightly above league average quarterback. And Heineke is not. So it's an upgrade there. I think it's probably, I'll accept neutral for McLaurin from you. I feel like it might be a little bit better. I think it's a big boost for Logan Thomas. I think he's going to get a nice little bump. And probably the passing game for the running backs is going to be is who's going to lose those targets that go to the tight end. The second wide receiver, we still have to see what's going to happen, who it's going to be. We don't really know. We think it might be Samuel. It could be De'Ami Brown. Could be DeAndre Carter for all we know. But by and large, I think when you look across the quarterback landscape, Wentz was the best one left out there. I mean, if you draft, let's talk rookies. Are you going to start Kenny Pickett over him and expect to win?
I mean, does Washington expect to win?
I think
That's a big question.
I think they do. I think they expect their defense to bounce back and their offense to be fairly decent. Are you going to start Malik Willis over him and expect to win? No.
I mean, if I'm
Sam
being
Howell and expect to win?
honest, I think there's at least 3 of the rookies I would take over Carson Wentz. Malik is
Right.
no Malik.
But do you
I should
expect
say
them to win more games if they do?
yes.
You're wrong.
I
Flat
disagree
out
about
wrong.
that.
Wentz is
I
Wentz
disagree
is
about
better.
that.
Wentz is better. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, once the quarterbacks have had time to acclimate, learn the offense, you're probably right. But this year, no, Wentz is the better quarterback. I mean, let's talk about free agents. You want Trubisky or Wentz?
Trubisky, actually.
I mean, I can see making the case there. You want Mariota or Wentz?
I think
So my issue with Wentz is, and he actually had a better season than I thought. We talked about this a little bit on Canton Bound last night. Like, I thought he was a lot worse than what he was. He finished 14 in fantasy points last season, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He plays too much hero ball. And what hurt him last year? Holding on to the ball and not making the play when he was supposed to. Well, I could be wrong here. One of you guys can correct me. Indy's line is a whole lot better than Washington's. And
they lost
don't know.
Eric Fisher. Their center situation isn't great. I mean, I get it.
But they have the money to go patch that over. I think what he's saying is Indy's line last year was better than what Washington has. Washington doesn't have a ton of cap room, and they still have plenty of work. That's why I think it would be foolhardy for Washington if they've made this trade to waste pick 11 on taking a quarterback. They have too many other needs if they want that defense to bounce back, if they want to make the most of their offense.
But Washington is in a win-win situation with this. They didn't give up a lot of draft capital, a couple thirds, a second, and they got Wentz. And the reason they didn't give up much draft capital is because they ate his salary. So that's going to be able to come off the books here soon. So they're not going to be in that situation. So if Wentz sucks and they lose a bunch of games, then they have high picks next year.
Well, and really, they literally they only gave up 2/3 because with the second rounders, all they did was drop back five spots.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I'm not saying.
To me, I think it's a smart move based on the quarterback landscape.
I'm not saying it's a bad trade, but I'm not betting on Wentz to help me win a Super Bowl. I feel like we are betting, and I feel like I said this on Monday too. We've kind of built up this lore around Carson Wentz as this great quarterback off of one season that he didn't finish and was in the MVP discussion. Outside of that, he's been okay. He's not been that good.
He's been okay, and people know that. Why do you think they're all shitting on him? Because they don't think he's even been okay, but he's been okay. I mean, I would have rather had Wentz last year in Denver than Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock.
I don't think there's a big difference between Wentz and Bridgewater, to be honest.
Neither do I. I don't know that Denver maybe gets one more win out of that. Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to go like win expectancy because of like baseball does that a lot. Like, I don't know that Carson Wentz, like if you had the over-under of 8 wins or 9 wins for Washington this year, like, yeah, okay, maybe he pushes you to 9 or 10. Like, Carson Wentz is not bringing you a Super Bowl. He's just not. I'm sorry. Like, I get it if that's what they're trying to do is just win. You know, the division, I guess, is open, depending on what you think of Dallas and Philly. But Carson Wentz is not a game-changing quarterback. Like, my argument for them is the only quarterback I don't think...
like 5 or 6 game-changing quarterbacks in the entire league.
And
can't
Washington
base-
moved for 2 of them and couldn't get it. I
And
think he was their
you can't
consolation
base
prize.
everything on a game-changing quarterback.
I'm
just
not
because
changing. If you'd let
there's
me
not.
finish talking instead of interrupting me, I would
I
finally
can't
get. I'd
help
try to get to my
myself
point.
sometimes.
Carson Wentz is not going to do that much for them. I don't think it's a great move. My point on the quarterbacks thing is now what Matt just mentioned. Like, if they take a quarterback at whatever because you guys said they dropped back 5
11.
picks,
So
11.
they still have 111.
If they take a quarterback now, to me, you just wasted another pick. You're wasting your resources. It shows exactly what Washington has been doing, in my opinion. You're betting on Carson Wentz, which I'm not
They're not
disagreeing
a
with
terrifically
you.
well-run organization. I give you that.
I'm not at all saying that this was a bad trade because you're right. They didn't give up anything. If they had the cap room to take on his contract, what they clearly did, like, it's not a bad move. I don't even think what Indy did last year was a bad move, even though they lost a first-round pick out of it. They moved on, and they're moving on with their future. But if you just brought in Carson Wentz, and we just talked about, they have many other. This is not Indy. Indy's biggest hole is quarterback. Washington has a ton of holes on that team. If they now have to take a quarterback at 11 while also bringing in Carson Wentz, they're just misusing all of their resources. Like, I do not think it's a good move on their part. There's so many other things I think they could have done. I don't think Carson, when I say game changer, I understand he's not, I was going to call him Malik Willis. He is not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. We've seen that you don't have to have just those guys to win a Super Bowl. What I'm saying is, like, he's not even in that next tier that's, like, viable to get you to the Super Bowl. He's just not, in my opinion. I hope that they prove me wrong. I don't think Carson Wentz is going to do anything. I think he actually hurts Antonio Gibson's value. We'll see about Logan Thomas because he tore his ACL, like, what was it, mid-season? So I don't know exactly when he'll be coming back. But
October.
Like, I think it's probably an even for even, as you guys mentioned, for Terry McLaurin, dynasty value-wise, because Carson Wentz throws probably just as many YOLO balls up to those wide receivers as Heineke does. Maybe he's just a little bit more accurate. So McLaurin might put up some better stats, but, like, he didn't check down that much. God.
Worse than that, Logan Thomas tore his ACL in December.
Yeah, that's what, I don't think he'll be back. I know they got Bates, who apparently they really like, so maybe we see Logan Thomas like mid-season. It probably starts off on PUP, but for fantasy, I don't know. I don't think it's that great a move, mostly because of that offensive line as well. Like, we've seen when Wentz has to hurry up, whether it's reading defenses or try and move and make a quick decision, he fails at that. And that's where I think it's going to hurt him.
So are any quarterbacks in this class day one starters?
Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell, I think, could start day one. And Matt Corral as well. Depending on the team, Matt Corral I'm a little bit more worried about because he ran such a RPO-heavy offense in college. They're the only three
I
that
feel
I can
like
start day one.
By and large, this quarterback class needs to sit for a year. If Washington drafts one of them, they can plop them on the bench behind Wentz, be done with Wentz at 0 cap hit after this year, and you've got your quarterback that you put through the Mahomes process. Not that anybody in this class is going to be Mahomes, but
right. And so I'll say something else. Not that anybody in this class is going to be Justin Herbert, but that's all anybody said about Justin Herbert a couple seasons ago. And look what he did for the Chargers. Like,
you know what I was going to say too for Washington, wouldn't it make more sense? I 100% agree with you about Carson Wentz. If it doesn't work out, you can move on from him easy. Wouldn't it make more sense for them to start building up? As Matt said, they have plenty of other issues. You use that pick 11, you use some of these other picks to get some quality players. And if Wentz isn't the guy, then you assess what your options are next year and move on. Maybe that's when you get a better shot at a quarterback in a draft.
So this is my thing. You're 100% right, Kyle. He has actually not gotten a team to the playoffs. I mean, he technically did get Philly too close, but then he was not able to finish it because he got injured.
He got a team to the playoffs.
No,
I
Nick
will agree
Foles
with
had
that.
to win those last 3 games to secure their seat.
Exactly. And my other thing with that is you're right. He almost got Indy in, but it's that key word right before there. Almost. There's a lot of quarterbacks who almost get their teams to the playoffs. Baker Mayfield almost got the Browns to an AFC championship. We're not talking about him being a great quarterback anymore. Like, I just think we need to move on past Wentz because we almost spent 30 minutes now talking about him. But I just think, I'm not saying this is a bad trade. That's my point. I just don't think Carson Wentz is going to do anything for, like, I don't think he changes anything for Washington. I think they're still a middle tier. They're still a middle tier organization. That's exactly where they're going to stay. This doesn't raise them or lower them, in my opinion.
But before we jump off this trade, I do think it's worth looking at the Indianapolis side because, you know, they have $69 million in cap space. They still have no first round pick. As we just talked about, it's not a quarterback rich draft. I would have agreed with you last year. They were like a quarterback away from competing. But as Dennis pointed out, they've lost a few people on the offensive line. They've lost a few people in other places outside of Pittman. I don't think they have much in a receiving core because we have really not seen, as much as I liked Paris Campbell as a prospect, we haven't seen him do much. Zach Pascal kind of is what he is. What do we think Indianapolis realistically does? I saw some reports that they think they're going to go hard after Jimmy G. My question would be,
why?
Is Jimmy G a demonstrable upgrade from Carson Wentz? I liked what Jimmy G did on a team that basically was a quarterback away and needed to move. I mean, the Colts have still some draft capital. They still have some money, but I don't understand totally what their plan is. I was one of those that thought Wentz would end up staying because they had no really other options. They only have Sam Ehlinger and James Morgan on the roster right now, quarterback.
Yeah, I think they have. It's going to be a tough year, I think, if they can't make a move. In part because they don't have. I don't think they have the capital to trade to get Deshaun Watson, who now is really the guy out there. If Watson goes to Carolina, let's say, and Sam Darnold has shown the door, you know, I don't think he's an upgrade anywhere. He slots in with the rest of the available quarterbacks here, and that either hasn't shown anything because they're rookies or has shown stuff. And well, there's a reason they're free agents. You know, maybe Jimmy G is it because they can put him in a ball control offense and run the ball with Jonathan Taylor. So maybe that is the way for them to go.
Yeah, I mean, and that's again what makes this interesting is there's a lot of talk, obviously, like Matt, you just mentioned about them going after Jimmy G. I think that they're going to try and grab a quarterback in the second round. I think getting that second round pick back this year, you know, their best bet is probably Ritter. I think is probably the one there. And I actually think could fit this offensive scheme very well because they're not going to ask him to do much. And I think when Cincinnati asks him to do a little bit too much is where he gets himself in trouble. But they are going to have to bring somebody in because if you're betting on getting Ritter in the draft and you don't, then you're relying on Sam Ehlinger or Jacob Eason. And then I think you're in a much worse situation.
Eason's in Seattle.
Oh, I see. I didn't even realize. So then you're relying on Sam
Eason and Drew
Ehlinger.
Lock are now the quarterbacks for the Seattle Seahawks.
Well, hey, good for Eason. He got to go back home. But I don't, then you're betting solely on Sam Ehlinger if you're not able to get Ritter in the draft. So it's, That's the interesting thing for me on Indy is the fact that they did that so quickly. And, of course, all the rumors are that it was more of Jim Irsay than anything else. Jim Irsay was upset with the way he crumbled in that Jaguars game and cost them a playoff spot and really kind of forced his hand there to get Carson Wentz out of there. So we'll see what happens. You know, I don't know that Jimmy – I think the biggest step up Jimmy G is over Carson Wentz is he doesn't turn the ball over as much. That's really the only thing I think he does better than Wentz.
Well, what do you think? There's been mixed messages coming out of Indianapolis. That I've seen that Frank Reich has apologized for vouching for Carson Wentz, and I've seen that Ballard, is it Ballard, the GM there?
Mm-hmm.
Ballard and Reich wanted to keep Wentz, and Irsay overruled him and said, F that guy.
I think it was more Irsay based. Like Ballard criticized Wentz earlier this offseason, but he never said anything like way. Oh, is one season, Kyle. Like I'm talking about overall. I understand if you think Wentz is going to be good. I don't know if you're a Washington Commanders fan and that's why. But I see if you gave him weapons in Philly. I mean, I feel like people make those arguments for a lot of quarterbacks and it never works out. Like at some point you got to raise level of all ships. That's just kind of the way I look at quarterbacks. I could be wrong. Usually I am. So, but with, I think Irsay more because he seemed to have more like disdain toward the Colts not making the playoffs. Like that's kind of where I think it ended up going.
I doubt Reich would have wanted to dump a quarterback with no plan. It's just, maybe Reich was disappointed with how they finished. It's also not to totally justify because I said I'm not a huge believer that Carson Wentz is the guy, but he was injured preseason, got injured during the season. He did play all 17 games. It's hard to know how much that broken foot in training camp, because there was a lot of questions about whether he was going to miss the first month of the season, but he definitely missed all the time that you would have to build rapport with your offense and to learn the scheme. And they had a incredibly brutal opening schedule that put them in such a hole early. It is fair to wonder if he was really given a chance to succeed there. But Matt's right, that final game against the Jaguars, it was inconceivable to me that they were going to lose.
I agree.
That game.
But there's a reason you play the games. I mean, sometimes some teams just step up, They made a whole entire movie about it, Any Given Sunday. It's just that's the axiom. Mm-hmm. I like the move. I'm curious about what's happening in Indy because as we saw, the Commanders were like, oh, we got a plan. We're going to try to get we're going to go for Rodgers. We're going to go for Wilson. And neither one of those things worked out. And then they traded for Wentz. Now, what's Indianapolis? I'm fascinated to see what we keep hearing how they love Ellinger, but Ellinger can't stay healthy.
Well, we'll move on from the team that couldn't get Wilson to the team that did. Probably the biggest trade of the week. And I say that not only as somebody who's proudly wearing the colors, but probably just given the fact of all that was involved, was Russell Wilson was traded from the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson and a 22 fourth went to the Denver Broncos for Drew Lock, defensive tackle Shelby Harris, tight end Noah Fant, the 109, a 22 second, a 22 fifth, and a first and second in the 2023 draft. It was quite a blockbuster move. I'm going to be honest. I might have been the most shocked person here. I was taking a small respite at work when I decided to check Twitter and saw that notification. People probably thought I have a hemorrhoid because of the screaming. But hey, you take that kind of good news wherever it comes. So now
it came there. Holy cow!
So. I guess for me, I was pretty excited from a fan standpoint. I still want to see what Denver's going to do. They have about $26 million in cap space left. They still actually have a lot of picks. They still have a second round pick this year, 2/3, 2/4, a fifth, a sixth, and 2/7. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do. But I was excited for, not quite as excited as Jerry Jeudy, but I was definitely excited. I'm excited for Jeudy and Sutton. I'm incredibly thrilled for my patience with Albert O. I'm just going to settle for Albert O, who I've had as a dynasty stash for 3 years at the end of my bench and is now Denver's starter.
Yeah, I think it's a great move for Denver, and it's, wheels up for that offense with Russ. They're, it's amazing after watching what the Rams did. It seems like teams now are really they're more willing to push all their chips into the middle of the table and say, look, we're going for it this year and we'll see how next year works out. And if shit don't work out, then we'll do what we can. I've got a dynasty team like that where I don't have virtually any draft picks, a 16-teamer. I've got a pretty good starting lineup, and I'm like, I'm either going to have to tear this down and completely rebuild. But before I do that, I'm just going to try to ride out one more year. See how the brakes fall.
Now, I know, Matt, you gave us a heads up that you're not quite as bullish.
It's not that I don't love the trade. I do, but I think of what Dennis just said is kind of the way I see Denver doing this, and I equated it to what they did with Peyton Manning a couple of years ago. Like, I'm not trying to say Russell Wilson's about to fall off a cliff, but he is going to be, I think, 34 this year.
Yeah, he's 33.
So he was a little bit older coming into the NFL. Now, he definitely has the arm to be more of a pocket quarterback, but as of late, the past couple of years, he's had to use his legs, at least to buy time, because Seattle has a bad offensive line. Denver's, I do think, is better. They didn't give up a ton when it comes to players already on the team, right? Like, no, it sucks seeing Noah Fant go, but it makes sense in my opinion, because if you look at what Nathaniel Hackett did and all of his offenses, the tight ends outside of, I think it was like half a season with what's his name in Green Bay that everybody fell in love with. Tunyon. I do not remember. Tunyon. He was really kind of the only one that thrived at the tight end position in Hackett's offense. I just think they're going all in because I think they have a Super Bowl window now, and that's why I like it. But I don't know that Russell Wilson's going to be their quarterback for like the next 5 years, if that makes sense. Because like I think we look at what Brady and Rodgers have done the past couple of years, and like, oh, well, these guys are playing until 40. We saw how bad that drop off was for Big Ben, right? Like, and it came quick. It wasn't something he was like slowly, gradually coming down. Like he was good, and then fell. Maybe it was because of the Tommy John in the arm. Said I'm a massive baseball guy as well, so I know how much that can affect people. But I feel like Russell Wilson coming to Denver, like they're going all in on like we've got a 2, maybe 3 year window to win a Super Bowl. Let's go for it. And I love that he did. I love that they did that. I think that's a great move. But I don't know that he's like a franchise changing quarterback, if that makes sense. Like I don't think he's going to be there for 5+ years. I think that this is a like 2 to 3 year window.
They are working on a supposedly a long-term extension. What I saw here that will be 4 or 5 years. So apparently they see it a little bit differently. I don't know. I was always shocked at how long Manning stayed. He was elite for a couple of years, but I'm going to be honest that it was more than just his last season where I had questions. I'll always love Peyton for what he did for us, but you're right. It's hard to know too with Wilson how much of last year was the finger. It did seem like he closed the season really strong, which is maybe an indication that once he got healthy, it was a little bit better. But it can't be any worse than the purgatory we've had for the last 6 years. I mean, when you have a checkered history of Brock Osweiler, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, I mean,
that's
I'm
why
going
I
to roll
don't
the dice with Russ.
That's why I'm not saying it's a bad trade. Like I get it, but I feel like, and I'm not saying that you did, but I saw a lot of people saying like, oh, here we go. Like this is going to make the AFC West like a great division for like the next 7-8 years. Like I wouldn't go that far. Like I think this is going to be a lot of fun for the next at least probably 3 years. Let's see what happens after that. Like I want to see, because my biggest fear with Russ and Felix Sharp and I were talking about this a little bit last night with Austin and Colin, like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, like they have the size and I think the ability to slowly develop into passing quarterbacks like we saw Donovan McNabb do in Philly. Like he used his legs a lot when he was younger, and then as he got older, learned more and more to play from the pocket, as did a Michael Vick. Michael Vick, when he was in Atlanta, it was almost a completely different quarterback than what we saw at Philly at times. Wilson's size scares me a little bit because I think him having the legs and being able to move around and find those holes, because he's like, it's something that Baker Mayfield has to do. It's why they get him out of the pocket so much, right? To create those throwing holes, because he's a little bit shorter than those quarterbacks. Like that's what worries me. I don't know that he's ever going to be like this perfect pocket passer. I think he's the best deep ball thrower in the league. I think his wheels up for Cortland Sutton, but I don't know if like I'm massively thrilled for more than like 3 or 4 years. Well, I got a question for you guys on that thing, because a lot of people are, I think they're unfairly comparing Jerry Jeudy to Tyler Lockett because they're both smaller wide receivers. And Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're the Denver Broncos guy. I know you watch every single snap. I feel like they've always used Sutton more as the deep field threat than Jeudy. So I feel like if anybody's going to play the Lockett role, it's going to end up being Sutton, not Jeudy. Like I feel Jeudy is more of the intermediate guy.
That's definitely the way that they've done it is Sutton and Tim Patrick. have been the Bombers, and they are KJ Hamler should be back. I mean, that was one of the reasons they went and got a player like him. Jerry Jeudy's been more of the crossing route possession receiver, which, if you were talking about Lockett from the guy who's catching 100 balls a year, that could end up being Jeudy. I hope this motivates Jeudy. Some of my qualms with watching him play has been sometimes I feel like he's been checked out and maybe he wasn't too pleased with the quarterback situation. He seemed to have a real bad vibe with Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur last year. They weren't even putting him on the field when he came back last year, and I don't know what all that was about. It would be nice to see him bounce back. He's the one I moved up the most in my dynasty rankings after the trade because I feel like he's going to be kind of that possession receiver, and they're going to use Sutton and Patrick on the outsides.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it's a situation where I'm trying to remember what team I saw it on, but like Jeudy is probably going to track for 100 catches and 1,000, maybe 1,100 yards. Sutton's probably going to be in the 75 catch, 1,300 yard range. The real conundrum there is what happens with Hamler and Patrick, because they've both shown themselves when they're on the field to be really productive. They have good contracts. One's on a rookie contract, one just signed an extension, and then you end up with Javonte Williams and Albert O. I mean, it's set up to be a very, very productive offense this year. In a division where you have to score points.
Just know, George Patton, for as much as you're getting praise right now, you signed Melvin Gordon, you're dead to me.
Yeah, that I tweeted it out the other day. Like that's one of the things I'm most excited about with the AFC West is I know they don't like directly compete against each other, but 4 matchups a year of Russell Wilson against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, like sign me up. It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
Plus, the NFC West and the AFC West play each other this year, so he's going to play Seattle again.
Back.
He's going to play the Rams again. He's going to play the Cardinals again.
That is going to be a lot of fun. All right, next up, Khalil Mack. Probably I'm very interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this. Dennis, I'll throw it to you first. I mean, he goes from Chicago to the Chargers for a second and a third. I kind of feel like the Bears may be throwing in the towel a little too quick on Mack, but what do you think?
Well, at some point you have to make a decision. How does your, what can you get a return on? We see it in dynasty leagues all the time. You're a middle-of-the-pack team. You need to rebuild. You have to get assets from somewhere. You have a good player. Well, I think Mack is clearly past his peak. He's still a productive player. And going into Los Angeles and lining up across from Bosa is going to definitely be helpful to him. It's just a situation where, to me, the Bears are they are rebuilding. They're coming out of the Nagy years. I think, aren't they changing defensive fronts too? Isn't there?
I think so, because Eberflus does something different.
Yeah,
they're changing entire
guy.
Schemes. Yeah, they're going from a 3-4 to a 4-3. Yeah.
So, and Mack, he doesn't fit that quite as well. So he goes to a situation that suits his skill set. The Bears got a decent return. I can't really bash it. I mean, they gave up 2 firsts and a second or something like that in 3 years ago. So
I think they gave up 3 firsts.
Yeah.
If I recall.
Yeah.
It was they gave up a lot for him, but at some point, the utility has waned enough that you just want to start to build, especially if somebody doesn't fit your scheme. I mean, why keep hanging out and keeping them around if they're not really going to fit your scheme? And he's 30, 31 years old now, 29 maybe.
He's getting a little older. So just to correct the compensation, they get a 2nd round pick this year and a 6th round pick next year, which
like
is even
good
less.
dynasty owners, they're gathering up 23 picks.
So I'm going to say for the Chargers, it makes sense that they're getting a good pass rushing piece. Their defense obviously let them down a little bit. If you're talking about Carson Wentz didn't help the Colts in a must-win game, that defense did not help the Chargers in a must-win game where many of us thought that they could have beaten the Raiders and maybe were a better team than the Raiders. That defense just couldn't hold them down at all. So it makes sense. Lining him up across Bosa has got to be very appealing. Khalil Mack was his most dominant when he was there with the Raiders in the AFC West. We never really saw it in Chicago. What scares me on the Chicago side is all the talk right now is Chicago is setting themselves up to have $121 million of cap space next offseason. And as someone who had high hopes for Justin Fields and would like to see him develop, it kind of scares me that the Bears are looking at 2022 as a punt year, which means that you would have kind of squandered the first 2 years of Fields. And what does that mean? And at that point in time, are they looking to make all kinds of changes? So from that standpoint, I agree with you. I think the Bears are just starting to clear out and looking not even toward this offseason, but toward next offseason. And that's kind of a bummer for my Field shares.
Well,
Yeah.
They're going to be playing from behind this year. And so it's going to be good for fantasy owners because Fields will have to run. He'll throw. They're going to play catch up. We saw what Blake Bortles did with his, early career playing from behind. So Fields is going to have that opportunity. They have to rebuild. There's no replacement for experience. So Fields is going to get a year to work in this offense. Then next year they're going to be in a position to bring in top tier talent at virtually every position around him and surround him with the best offensive line with a good defense. Montgomery, I don't know if he'll still be there, but who knows with Khalil Herbert, he looked good last year. So they're going to have opportunities to do that, and they should be finally having some first round draft picks back.
Yeah, I think it's a great move for the Chargers. I know that they're switching schemes on the defense, so maybe that's why the Bears are willing to get out from him. I feel like you could have gotten more. I know he had a down year last year, but I have a feeling he's going to go to the Chargers and absolutely smash. Brandon Staley knows him. He was in Chicago. He was actually, I believe, one of the linebacker coaches. It was either that first year or the second season that Khalil Mack was there, so he's got the connection with them. And Matt, as you mentioned, putting him across from Bosa, that makes that defensive line really scary. So I think it's a great move for them. We do have a question on here from Little Boxes on Twitch. And before I read the question, I want to preface it. So Deshaun Watson will have no criminal charges pressed against him. That was released earlier today. Seems like the grand jury, from what I was just looking at from Pro Football Talk, wanted to talk to a witness that either didn't show up or did not talk to them. So they did not indict him. He's getting no criminal charges pressed against him. So that means that he's likely going to play. Now, one thing we do have to remind everybody, the NFL does not have to have criminal charges to suspend you because of their, I forgot what the code of conduct policy. So they can still suspend him. But I would think even if they do, you're looking at a max of 8 games. I don't think he'll be suspended for a year because they will negotiate it and it'll get knocked down because, again, no criminal charges. And we've seen, if we're just being honest here, a lot of these guys get the harsher penalties because there's video. As far as we know, there's no kind of video evidence of anything with Deshaun Watson, thankfully. Or, I guess not. I don't know how to put that because you want, if he did what was said, you want him to be persecuted for that, but I don't know that I'd want to see a video of any of that stuff is what I meant. So, but he likely is going to play at least at some point in time this year. So the big question is, will Houston trade for him? And Little Boxes ask, what should I trade Watson for in a dynasty league? I heard someone talking about dynasty earlier. I am not trading him now. Watson was one of the best quarterbacks in dynasty leagues, in football and fantasy when he was on the field. He's not going to be in Houston. He's likely going to get traded. And I'm honestly not going to lie. The newest team that has popped up in the trade stakes for Watson, I'm not thrilled about, and that's the Cleveland Browns.
I'm torn because Talent-wise, I completely love it for the Cleveland Browns. Scheme fit, I don't. We know Stefanski is a two tight end run the ball coach. So what do you need Deshaun Watson for? And you're going to have to give up a ton of capital to get him. From the off the field stuff, it's just not stuff I want to have to deal with. But hell, we went out and got Kareem Hunt after his incident. So if I'm trading him, I'm probably going to start it at 2 firsts and a player I think that's going to provide me some utility. So people probably aren't going to trade him for that, but I'd like 2 firsts and a starter.
So I traded for Watson last year and ended up eating it, but I was in a Superflex league where I thought I was competitive, and I ended up getting him for 2 firsts. You might get that. I would say if I had him right now, I would not trade right now. I want to wait a couple of months because it seems like the trade market for Deshaun Watson is really going to heat up. And you could probably get a decent amount right now. You might be able to get a lot more in a couple months when his destination is known and we know where he is actually going to play, because I'm still not completely ruling out that he ends up staying in Houston and having to play there. And while he's a decent talent, I don't know what they have around him.
Let me pay some bills before we finish answering this question. We've gotten so wrapped up in our stuff that it's our enthralling conversation. So we'll pay some bills. Hoops fans, the latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is too good to pass up. I'm talking between the legs 360 windmill good. New customers can bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It's that simple. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you can still take your shot at a big payday. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings daily fantasy basketball contest. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN and bet just $1 on any NBA team to get $150 in free bets if they win. That's promo code TPPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 and older. Minimum age and location requirements vary by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for a full list of requirements and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Void where prohibited. Minnesota, minimum $5 deposit. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call or text the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NEW-YORK or text HOPE New York.
Yeah, so I'm with little boxes here. And what Matt said, I'm holding him. There's no point in moving him now. I still think he's at his lowest point of value because even if he doesn't get traded, if he stays in Houston, we've seen him with just as little talent around him in Houston take that team to the playoffs and still be a fantasy starter. So I think realistically, he's going to go right back to being at least a top 5 quarterback. I'm not putting him over. Shoot, I think Herbert's probably close because Herbert doesn't do as much rushing. But I'm not putting him over Mahomes or Allen, but then I think he's right there in the conversation with Lamar, Burrow, Herbert, Murray is like the next grouping to be in that 4-5 range. So I'm holding.
Forgot Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson's safely top 10. I don't know if he's top 5. You know what? The one thing with Russ, I hate to jump back to that, is the year that Pete Carroll let him cook, that first half of the season, I think he was like QB 1 or 2 for that whole first half until they went back to running the ball more. So,
well, I think part of it comes down to also what's your team situation? If I've got 2 studs plus Deshaun Watson, then maybe it makes sense to move him.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy that Superflex league where I took a shot on Watson if he plays this year. My 5 quarterbacks on that team are Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, Deshaun Watson.
Am I in that league with you?
Unfortunately, you're not. I wish
Oh,
I was.
great.
I wish I could compile that kind of a roster in the league with you.
All
right,
I don't know how I let that happen. But
we kind of. Oh, go ahead.
I was just say, if you're rebuilding, maybe it makes sense to move him, get a bunch of draft capital. If you're contending and you've still got a really good pair of starting quarterbacks, it makes sense to maybe move him for pieces that are going to allow you to win. I mean, it's great to be theoretical, but we want to win. So it all comes down to winning.
So we went obviously very long on the Russell Wilson and Carson Wentz talk here. So we're going to kind of speed through a lot of these other deals that happened. Mike Williams back to the Chargers, 3 years, $60 million. That was an interesting move for me, especially in the fact they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. It feels like they probably should have just done that, and they'd have him at least for one more year on a cheaper deal, because I believe the deal is actually more of like they can get out after 2 years. Harold Landry gets his deal done, 5 years, $87.5 million. Max Crosby gets a new deal, 4 years, $95 million. Sterling Shepard back on a 1-year deal that is cap friendly. Jason Kelsey gets a new deal, $14 million on 1 year. He's the highest paid center. Giants are looking to pursue Mitch Trubisky to compete here with Daniel Jones. Matt, do you think that's a smart move for Mitch, though? Like, I feel like he's one of the guys, and a guy who didn't really play much last year has really helped his stock in the fact that he's considered one of the best quarterbacks on the market.
Yes, but just one quick correction. Mike Williams, they did pick up his 5th-year option. He played 5 years for the Chargers. His rookie deal expired.
Gotcha. Good point.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, that probably was dumb. No, we can't do math. Math is tricky. I would love to see Trubisky go somewhere where he gets a shot to start. So the only thing that gives me trepidation about the Giants is it seems like all offseason they've been making it known that they feel like they hosed Daniel Jones and this was going to be a real good year for Daniel Jones, but they haven't picked up his 5th-year option, which is an interesting statement. Trubisky, Brian Dable is the coach there for the Giants. He was the offensive coordinator in Buffalo where Trubisky was last year. So he would come in presumably knowing the system. Maybe for him, that's a sense of comfort. If he went there to kind of rehab and work with a coach, maybe he had a great experience there and he thinks this gives him the best shot to compete. I also don't know, totally what the market is for Mitch Trubisky. It feels like opinions are mixed. I know even on here, a couple of us think that, maybe it wasn't all him, but a lot of people were out on him as recently as a year ago. So maybe he thinks this is kind of the way to rehab himself back in. Could be like a Ryan Tannehill going to Tennessee kind of situation.
If I'm Trubisky, I probably don't want to go to New York. As much as I might like Daboll, I don't want to go somewhere where they're trying to pump up the current starter. To me, if I'm him, I'm going to, look at Indianapolis. I'm going to look at not Carolina, Tampa. I want to go. I'm going to take the path of least resistance. I think Indianapolis and Tampa are the 2 best opportunities right now. They have the 2 best teams. So if I'm Mitch, I want to go to one of those. New York.
Yeah.
They're talking about they're open to trading Saquon Barkley. They're restructuring Sterling Shepard's deal so they can get his 6 games. Kenny Galladay. They're not re-signing Evan Ingram, it looks like. So it'll be somebody else there dropping passes at tight end. I don't know. They're New York's. It's a meme. Tell us you're going into a rebuild without telling us you're going into a rebuild. Saquon Barkley is on the block.
Well, and I think a big part of New York's issue is that they, even though they don't have an incredible team, they don't have a lot of cap space.
Yeah,
they're still projected. looks like they're projected to only have like about 4 or 5 million in cap space, even after reworking some of those deals. So that's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only upside Mitch has with going to New York is if Daniel Jones does falter and then they just decide to replace him with Mitch mid-year. He's got Dayball who will back him, and I can't remember who the GM is now for the Giants, but he has that personal. So he has that personal connection with Dayball. So like maybe they believe more. Like he'll be like, okay, we'll back Dayball and his guy Mitch Trubisky. Otherwise, I'm with you. Like we talked about on Monday, I think the Saints would be a good fit for him. Indy now with them moving on from Carson Wentz, like I'd much rather go somewhere I think I have a better shot of starting if I am him. While we don't know the exact details of the new contract, Aaron Rodgers is staying in Green Bay for at least 4 more years, it looks like, and Devontae Adams has been tagged. I think that's just good news for all Packers fans, and if you have Rodgers and Adams in Dynasty, I think they'll figure out a way, I think, to keep those two together for the near future at least and continue to be Super Bowl contenders. So I think if you have Adams, you are now extremely excited to know he's paired with Rodgers moving forward. Tariq Cohen, Greg Zuerlein, and Blake Jarwin have all been released. Got 2 more things we're going to talk about before we get out of here, guys. Matt, you put on here, I did not even see this, so I'm very intrigued because I was shot down in our group chat because I said I did not think that Tom Brady was over yet, and apparently Mike Florio somewhat agrees with that. He said that he thinks Tom Brady will be traded to the 49ers and will start week 1. What are your thoughts?
I mean, so part of me wonders if Tom Brady said he wanted to play again, why Tampa? He would have to get traded. And why would Tampa Bay be like, oh, we built our team, we have been a contender. Sure, we're just going to ship you off so that we can have Kyle Trask. Or, does he get traded for Jimmy G, which would be the oddest trade in the history of time? The other thing that immediately jumps out to me is if this happens, holy hell, did they waste their time going for Trey Lance? Because they mortgaged 3 years of their future when if you're just going to ride with Jimmy G, and then I'm not saying Tom Brady's not the greatest quarterback of all time because he is, and that's great for them, but you mortgaged first round picks that you could have used to build the rest of the team up for. I mean, it's 1,000 times worse than the Jordan Love situation, which is something that we mock Green Bay for endlessly. So it's very weird. I know that's going to, then it makes you wonder, what are they doing with Trey Lance? Because he would not be an ideal backup for Tom Brady. Their playing styles are not, I would not guess, to be very similar.
I don't know. Brady broke 100 yards rushing for his career last season, I think.
First career.
I think it's, you never say never. But and the allure for Brady, I'm sure, is, well, it's, my home area team. I grew up watching Montana. But at 45 years old on a team that has some – it's not like everybody's saying that San Fran is a quarterback away. They've got some holes to fill. If Brady wanted to play, I think if I'm Brady and I want to play another year, I stay in Tampa. Because they've got a better team in Tampa, in my opinion. But I don't know, man. It makes for a good off-season talking point, I guess. If it happens, will I be surprised? Not surprised. I'll be disappointed.
Let me ask you this. What if they traded Trey Lance for Tom Brady?
I don't think Lance is going anywhere. Like, what are we I'm going to equate this to LeBron James. Like, we've seen LeBron James has talked about for years, right? Like, he's going to stick around long enough because he wants to play at least one season with his son, Bronny. And it's not going to matter where Bronny goes. He'll sign like a veteran's minimum contract to go play there. I think what Dennis said is probably what draws Tom Brady to do that. It's like he's always wanted to be in San Francisco. Like, you can't put a price on something like that, especially a guy like that who has everything. this, whether he goes to San Francisco and wins another Super Bowl, right? Like, it doesn't change his legacy. He's going to go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. So if this is something that he really wants to do, like, all the rumors are that him and Bruce Arians were not getting along toward the end of this last year. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe he just doesn't want to be, because he's never really fully come out and said, like, I'm not coming back, right? Like, he's kind of said it. There's been the offseason, or the Adam Schefter and all them broke it, but I don't know that Tom Brady's ever said, like, I'm officially retiring and filed his papers.
I mean, he had that like 9-page Instagram post about it.
Yeah, but he like, even when they asked him, it was not Pat McAfee. He does a show on Sirius XM, right? I think when they asked him about it the week after that happened, he didn't say I'm retired. He said, well, you never say never, or something like that. So like, he kind of backed off of it. I think if he were to go to San Francisco, it's likely again for like a year, maybe 2. And at that point, I feel like, as weird as going to say, Trey Lance becomes like what Aaron Rodgers was, except like Brett Favre was already there. Like, they just hold on to him for another year or 2, let him learn under Brady, and then he takes over. Like, I don't think they're going to trade Trey Lance. I mean, you said it'd be the weird thing to see him trade that for Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, I thought the Patriots were going to do that like years ago when we first talked. It was like, oh, wouldn't it be crazy a couple years ago before he went to Tampa Bay? I was like, wouldn't it be crazy? Bill loves Jimmy G if they just sent Tom Brady to San Francisco. So I'd love to see it, just because I think it makes for a fun, interesting storyline. I don't think that the 40, like, I agree with Dennis, they're not just a quarterback away, but they're close to being a very good playoff team and Super Bowl contender.
They were in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, like I think Brady raises that level a little bit. So and he may bring, he's got Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, like George Kittle, like Matt. We might actually be able to like realize our dreams of George Kittle being a number 1 tight end again with Tom Brady there. So I know. So like, if it happens, I'd be thrilled for it. Am I betting on it? No. Like, if you asked me to go put like my mortgage payment or like my house payment down on that, I probably wouldn't do it because I'm going to lose that money. But it would be a fun thing, I think, to see for him to go to San Francisco. The major franchise tags here: Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, Dalton Schultz, David Njoku, Mike Gesicki, Cam Robinson, Orlando Pace, and Jesse Bates. Dennis.
Orlando Brown.
Oh, did I say Orlando Pace?
Orlando Pace, I think, is in the Hall of Fame. If they franchise tag him,
it
would have been a good move.
But great move back in 1978 or 80 or whatever it was. Anyways,
I mean, it wasn't
Orlando
that long ago. He played with Warner.
Anyways, okay, so what was that, 1990s? Back in the 1990s. Dennis, pick one franchise tag that you were either excited about or made no sense. Just give us one that you want to talk about real quick.
I think the Gesicki one makes a ton of sense. Obviously, Adams makes sense. Njoku was surprising just because I'm not sure I would spend that much money on him. But I get the concept of I'm a team that runs a lot of 2 tight end sets. And if one gets injured, you want to have 3 quality tight ends. And with Bryant, Hooper, and Njoku, they do. I think Njoku is probably the guy to have for fantasy. I saw somewhere somebody said, oh, well, Njoku's a better blocker than Hooper. I don't think Njoku is a better blocker than Hooper. And Njoku suffers from concentration drops sometimes. But he's a physical freak, an athletic freak, and can definitely do some damage. So on a team that uses a lot of 2 tight ends, yeah, you need to have 3 tight ends. And if you've got the cap space, maybe it's a luxury for a lot of teams. I didn't hate it.
I think the Njoku tag proves just 2 things. One, that the Austin Hooper contract signing gets curiouser and worser every day. And 2, that the Browns plan to bring back the wishbone in this era of forward thinking. They're like, fuck it, we don't need wide receivers. Jarvis, I'm glad you were here. Odell, you're gone. We're going to roll 3 tight ends and 2 backs, and everybody else can suck it.
Wishbone is 3 backs.
Look, you know what? Drop Njoku in the backfield, then. He's such a good blocker. The one that I think caught me off guard, not that it doesn't make sense, as Dennis said, is Mike Gesicki, because it seemed like the Dolphins didn't care about him and weren't that interested. There were like very little rumblings. So I was kind of surprised that they like him enough that they franchise tagged him. But I think that's a good news. Makes me feel better about his value, because I think he fit really well with Tua in that offense.
I mean, and don't forget, teams can change their mind if you haven't signed the tag. We saw Carolina do it with Josh Norman. They're like, all right, you want to be a jerk in long-term negotiations? Screw you. Now you're a free agent. So, some of these guys, if they dilly-dally around, they may find the team decides they've got some better options.
Yeah, I mean, the Godwin one made sense, but it disappointed me a little bit. I was really hoping he'd get a chance to kind of hit free agency and possibly go somewhere to be the one. I think he's definitely gotten to a point where he's better than Mike Evans, but I don't know that he'll be like the solid one Mike Evans the two. I feel like they're going to be 1A, 1B again this year. So I wish he could have gone somewhere to kind of prove himself. And then the Njoku one for me as well. More just because of what it does for Cleveland. In all honesty, as much as I love Kevin Stefanski coming over to Cleveland, I'm now starting to worry a little bit about that. He doesn't seem like he's willing to change his offensive scheme at all. He loves running those 2 and 3 tight end sets, and we've seen that that's just not what succeeds in the NFL. And maybe that was because of Baker being injured last year, but you've got to have some receivers. It cannot just all be a tight end game. They have said that they came out and said that the reason they did it was because Njoku's gotten better as a blocker every single year, and we know that they want to rely on Nick Chubb, but now they also tendered Dearness Johnson, and all the rumors are they're going to trade Kareem Hunt. So I don't know what's going on in Cleveland. I'm starting to get worried that it's just like what we saw back, and I think it was 2009 with Derek Anderson and Josh Gordon. We got our one great year of success 2 seasons ago with Baker Mayfield in this offense. Is going to go back to another decade of dismay and despair. So
we all saw Baker throw the ball. Kevin Stefanski is just reacting accordingly.
I don't know, but that'll do it for us today. We'll be back on Monday to kind of talk a little bit more about free agency and if any other crazy trades or anything goes down over the weekend. Everybody be safe. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you guys again on Monday.